and welcome to another episode of 60 Minutes with. I'm your host, Crystal Petrie. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you subscribe to my channel right now. On this week's episode of 60 Minutes with, I we are talking about rainwater. Yes, you heard me correctly. Rainwater. The importance of recycling rainwater, how that's beneficial to you and your health and your hydration, all the things. If you have never heard of a podcast about rainwater, this is the podcast for you. Go tell your friends, go tell your family. This is the podcast for them as well. And here to educate all of us, including myself, about the importance of recycled rainwater is Alexander Williams. So, welcome to the podcast, Alexander. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I feel grateful today to be on this podcast, this platform. Thank you so much. And I am feeling
Absolutely.
alive. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes. So I'm really, which I was telling you about this before we came on air, how excited I am about doing this podcast with you. Before we get into it, tell us, Mr. Williams, where in the world are you?
I'm in the beautiful state of Texas, Austin, Texas, the capital. So that's exactly where we are today.
All right. We love us some Texas people. We love us some Texas people. Okay, so you have been, is the correct word recycling? Is it harvesting rainwater? What is the correct language with that? Alexander, can you hear me?
I can. So the
Okay,
uh, the correct language is harvesting. Yeah, harvesting. You can use
harvest.
recycling as well, but harvesting would be the way to do it. And the reason being, it's consider it as a crop, right? Like you harvest wheat, you harvest corn, you harvest other crops, vegetables, and things of that nature. So we do harvest rainwater, bottle it, and give it out to the public.
How long have you been harvesting rainwater? And the name of your company is Aurora Rainwater. How long have you been harvesting rainwater? And tell us about the start of your company.
No, fantastic. So Aura Rainwater, we've been doing it since 2018. A little bit before that is 2016, but we spent 2 years in regulations, meaning making sure we are certified by the FDA, EPA, TECQ here in Texas. I mean, all the regulatory bodies, and also doing some studies because we knew when we came out with this particular concept that there would be some pushback. So we had to make sure that we had the data to prove what we were saying as we come along. So Aura, is a passion of mine. I am a meditator. I meditate very, very deeply. Uh, Started one morning. I meditated at 3 a.m. I came out of my meditation, and I had the traditional water filter, like a Berkey filter that we used, to purify water and drink the water. So as I coming out of my meditation, all of the things that I've studied over the years, as far as water, structured water in the body, water overall, just everything when it comes to health and wellness, just all came rushing to me at like 3:30 a.m. in the morning after I got out of my 3 a.m. meditation. And as I was taking that water from the Berkey filter, it just hit me like, okay, the philosophy of Dr. Masaru Emoto and all of the work that he did and the research that he does and the philosophy that I follow, I need a blank slate to get this message out. And to do that, rainwater came to mind, and I sought out to explore the realms of rainwater, and that's how Aura Rainwater was born.
Why has rainwater harvesting or rainwater recycling become, I feel like here lately, and I could be wrong, I feel like here lately that it has become an increasingly popular practice. More people are doing it than ever before. Why do you think that is?
I think collectively, as conscious beings on this planet, we realize that this is home for us. We're floating on a spaceship, and if we don't take care of it, then we're doomed. So I think that's the first thing. So collectively, the conscious collectiveness is actually coming together and say, hey, let's clean up our backyard. Secondarily, I think uh, the reduction of environmental stewardship, and I mean by the reduction of environmental stewardship, people are starting to look at, again, not only their backyard, but how can they do something locally, right? Environmental stewardship and talking to their neighbors, and again, that collective mind comes into effect. So community engagement, I think, is big. And then you have the governments, right? So most people follow what the government regulation says and what they do, but people are starting to think for themselves. And in thinking for yourself and critically thinking, I think people are starting to open their minds and saying, hey, let's do something that is out of the ordinary, again, to save the planet, to save our environment, to save our homes. Let's do what we need to do instead of relying on the government.
Okay. How, and I'm sure we'll get more into it in the podcast, but it's just at the top of my mind right now. How do you harvest rainwater? Like, what is that process? Do you just have like some kind of container that catches the rainwater when it rains?
Yeah. So to break it down into layman's terms, you're exactly right. So there is a container, except that container holds 65,000 gallons of water. We have
Wow.
a few of them, and just like you would collect water off of your roof of your house, right? You have your rain gutters and it falls down. We collect off of ours as well. So our foot space is roughly 56,000 square feet. That's 56,000 square feet. So for every inch of rain that falls, we collect roughly 23,000 gallons of water. So here in Central Texas, there's 36 inches per year that falls, and you multiply that, and you get the abundance, amount of water that we can do, and that's just on the average rainfall. There may be some when there's more, and then some that's less, but that process basically is just that. We just have these huge tanks that we collect in, and from there we take it through our trade secret process, in which we then put it into our bottling facility, and there comes out the end product.
Okay. And I'm assuming, and whatever you can tell, please, and whatever you can't, we all understand. I'm assuming that once the water comes off of the roof into these huge containers, that there's a process that makes it healthy to drink and
Yeah,
consume.
yeah, absolutely. I mentioned the regulations in the very beginning. So all of the government bodies uh, would want you to always have the water moving, and that also goes to municipalities. So we are considered a municipality, in which water always has to be moving. Um, Also, too, I would say that the process, we mimic Mother Nature as much as possible in our process. Um, to say that we believe that water is alive. Again, I mentioned crops and harvesting and things like that. We do believe that water is alive and water has memory. So we take special care of the water. And again, we mimic Mother Nature as much as possible. So when you do have the ability to have the aura experience, you're experiencing something that Mother Nature has given. There's no added chemicals or preservative or anything like that. It never touches the ground, so it's purely soft in nature, and it's made for us. As you can tell, after it rains, you can see the grass grows wildly.
And
The colors
cleaner.
are vibrant. Yeah,
Yes.
greener. Animals in the wild, even they say, hey, let's call truce and let's just drink this wonderful precious thing called water, and then let's get back at it to chase each other and do whatever we do. And we made it of the same elements. So along in that process, we just take special care of our water as mimic Mother Nature as much as possible.
And the harvested rainwater, it is, you we can drink it, we can cook with it, can we bathe with it, can we brush our teeth with it, wash our face with it, can we do all of those things as well?
Absolutely. So with Aura, you can definitely do all of those things that you want to do with it. It is perfectly safe. again, all of the regulatory bodies, and we're constantly sending samples to the regulatory bodies for them to sample, just like any municipal water source would do. It's just that we're not pulling from the ground. We consider ourselves partners with Mother Earth versus pulling, extracting water from the aquifers and streams and valleys. We just allow her to recharge her aquifers and streams. Again, whatever we collect, whatever we harvest, we use. Everything else goes back to her.
If people, if my audience that are watching, that are listening to you, Alexander, want to purchase your recycled, harvested rainwater, or maybe they want to get more information about what it is that you are doing, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, just simply reach out at gratitude at aurarainwater.com, and someone will get back to you via email. We do email because we do get a lot of inquiries from people, and we will answer any questions that you guys may have.
Okay, thank you for that. How can harvesting rainwater contribute to a more sustainable lifestyle?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Uh, it is a lifestyle. It is a
Mhm.
lifestyle. I mentioned the collective consciousness in the beginning, and one has to be conscious enough not only for environmental stewardship, but also saying, okay, this is something that can be that I can use for myself, right? To actually have me prosper from it. Um, so that being said, just the collective consciousness of everyone, um, using it as a lifestyle would be beneficial. It helps again the earth. It helps you consciously knowing that you're doing something good for the planet, and also for the environment. That's how I can see it being a part of the lifestyle.
In what ways can harvesting rainwater help stop or mitigate, slow down, whatever words you want to use, Alexander? In what ways can that mitigate droughts and help with the effects of droughts?
So harvesting rainwater. So imagine a desert, right? Or just say it's on a drought, right? And you look at the ground, and I'm sure all of us have seen this when you see the ground is cracking, right? It's so dry, you see the cracks in the dirt. Well, when it rains, when that water hits the ground, it actually removes the dirt even more. So imagine an abundance amount of rainfall coming down, and now you're starting to create these divots, right, in the earth. So if we
Correct.
harvest the rainwater, right, uh, if we harvest the rainwater, we're not having those divots be created. And again, the abundance amount of rainfall, if it rains a lot, the divot gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And over time, it forms a puddle. And then over time, that puddle forms a ditch. And over time, that ditch forms, some other, if it's not attended to, it can form, a canal. And now you have an entire landscape that is being changed because we haven't done anything to prevent these things from happening. So harvesting rainwater is a great way to help the earth in that perspective. Now, in my example I just gave, and the water, coming down and divots are being created, people are saying, well, how, it's dry. Well, how are you gonna, moisturize the earth and let
Yeah,
the
that's
grass
what
grow? Yeah. So when that happens, it's like a sponge, right, or a paper towel. When you have a spill on the counter, you put the paper towel down, and then it just gets absorbed, right? So the earth does the same thing. It will grab water from other places and bring it inward. Now we're talking something on a mass scale level. So as it rains, the water, again, we have these divots in the earth and how it moves, and the landscape. So water will eventually make its way there. Again, the analogy of the paper towel, it will absorb the things within. So harvesting rainwater is actually good. It's good for us. It's not allowing it to create those divots when we get those droughts in dry places.
Okay. Okay. Um, what would you say? And of course, we are not bashing treated water or bottled water that we buy in the stores or anything like that. I am just trying to be educated on this. What is the difference between like the treated tap water, the bottled waters that we buy in the stores, in terms of quality and sustainability with recycling rainwater?
So let's start with rainwater. So rainwater is actually made for us. I mean, that's the source. I mean, before it hits the ground, it comes from the sky, right? And it drops down in the ground. It gets absorbed. It works its way through the layers of the earth, and it ends up into an aquifer and into the underground streams. Along the way, it's picking up minerals, right? That's your zinc, that's your iron, that's all of the minerals that the earth has right underneath. As it sits into the aquifers, it sits there, and when companies come to uh, take the water out and drill wells and take the water out, those are filled with rich minerals. So, and filled with rich minerals, they have to uh, put it through a process to remove the minerals because it's too toxic to the human body for consumption. Now, some wells, right? People have wells in their yards, and they use well water to drink. Those are more on the upper level, right? If you can consider like the layers of the earth, they're on the
Hmm.
upper level, so they are not as heavily embedded with minerals as it is deeper into the
Okay.
aquifers, where you have to drill down deeper to get to. So that water, again, has been proven it's safe to drink because the mineral content isn't that heavy. But like I said, those companies drill down and they extract, the waters as heavy mineralized. They remove those minerals, and removing those minerals, they take it through process, usually reverse osmosis, which again removes all of the minerals out. But when you come back to the end, they add minerals normally that's suitable for human consumption, right? On the bottling side. Now you take a municipality, for example, that gets their water from, let's say, a river or a lake or a stream or anything of that nature. Again, this is top surface water, so the mineral count isn't heavy. However, you got a lot of bacteria, right? That occurs there, so they have to take it through a process, and that's where they add the chemicals like chlorine, fluoride, bromine, and all the other chemicals. And those chemicals are used to get get the water safely to the tap, but keeping the distribution line, which is the piping, non-corrosive. And
Okay.
that's one of the reasons they add those chemicals to the water to reach your tap. So when you take the measurement overall of tap water versus well water versus spring water versus rainwater, and you measure the total dissolvable solids and all, meaning like the purification of them all, rainwater is the top quality because again, it never touches the ground, so it's coming from the sky, and it's pure. It's the purest of them all. And again, that's not bashing any of the
Right.
processes that I named, but it's a proven scientific method that these are what the different players in these industries use to get water to the consumers.
Now, earlier we spoke about how harvesting rainwater helps with drought. On the other end of that, how does harvesting rainwater help cities or towns that are prone to flooding? How does harvesting rainwater help with that?
Going back to the analogy earlier, right? When those divots get bigger and it get bigger and bigger and bigger, they begin to hold a lot of water, and that water, again, based on the landscape of the earth, begins to flow. So hence flash floods, right? So it rains a lot, it collects in one place, and now here it comes downstream, and it's a flash flood. So we as consumers would use harvest rainwater, right? And it would take a lot of us, depending on your mind and where you're thinking of the scalability of that is. But if we harvest it right, and we have these barrels at our home, whether that's a 10-gallon barrel or something to water our gardens, we're relieving the stress of the flooding, the erosion that will occur from the natural landscape. So we become partners again. We become partners with Mother Nature and allowing the natural flow of things, versus again having a wash all flash flood coming down. So that's how it could help.
Can rainwater harvesting contribute to reducing pollution in our water and that, finds its way into the lakes and the streams and the ponds and things like that?
It can. Um, the reason it can is because the more we use it, right? Let's just think of a house, right? So you have a house, you have some rain barrels there to water your lawn, right? So that diminishes the constant uh, demand on the municipal water, right? So
Yes.
people are, watering their lawn with it, and uh, their gardenings and things like that. So reducing that. At the same time, we could also use it for, depending on where you are and how much of a good system you have, because there are systems now that you can implant in your home. You can drink with it as well, right? And again, reducing that the demand for the municipalities. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, and you know what? It brought up a thought for me because sometimes, and this goes back to the drought. Sometimes cities or states go through major droughts, and one of the first things that like your city government asks you to do is stop watering your grass and your lawn, stop
Hmm.
washing your cars in the driveway to help conserve water. But if you have rainwater, if you're recycling rainwater, that does not take away or pull away from the city's water supply because you have your own water
Correct.
supply.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
And depending on how big your tank is, like here in Austin, on the west side of Austin, which is the Hill Country area, you have homes that have huge rainwater tanks in which they fill, right, and they use for their homes, to flush the toilets, to brush their teeth, to do a little bit of cooking, but wash clothes. Again, reducing that strain, that water demand on municipalities, where it can easily evenly be distributed, to every consumer, or every what's the word I'm looking for, a resident, right, within that in that range. Yes.
If somebody wanted to start harvesting rainwater, they're watching you, Alexander, they're listening to you, Alexander, and they're like, you know what, he's making a lot of sense on this podcast. What would you say would be the first thing that they would need to do? And I'm talking about somebody, that's living at home, that has their house, they want to start harvesting rainwater. What's the first thing that they need to do? What's the first thing that they need to buy?
Gotcha. So I think the first thing they need to do is look up the regulations in their, I want to say parish, but their county,
Okay.
right? Look up the regulations in their county, because every state doesn't allow you to harvest uh, rainwater.
Okay.
Um, Not every state does. Uh, California, in particular, they don't want you to do that. Um, for whatever reason that is, but that's one of them. But here in Texas, you're allowed to do it, and it depends on, again, what county you're in for that. So getting in touch with them and find out if they have a program, because a lot of the municipalities will sell the rain barrels. Again, we're moving into that direction of sustainability, so they will allow, and you can purchase rain barrels. You can go to your local hardware store, and find out if they, like Lowe's or Home Depot, to see if they carry rain barrels, and purchase yourself a rain barrel. Um, Another thing that they can do while they're at home is make sure that your gutter system is fully operational, right? Because you're collecting off of your roof, right, or your house, and if it's not operational, then it doesn't do you any good. All the water would just kind of seep out everywhere or go to one side of the home where it doesn't work. So doing that. The third thing I would say is um, just research. Just start to research rainwater harvesting, how it's done, what what could be done. Even formulate. There are some groups that I speak to about rainwater harvesting, and some uh, neighborhood associations that I speak to about rainwater harvesting, and I'll consult with some schools as well about that. And bringing that into because a lot of schools are starting gardens, right,
Right.
and community gardens. So all of that is being done at the same time. So those three things I would say someone needs to could do to start looking into rainwater harvesting, but checking with your local municipality or municipal source first would be a great way to start, just to find out the regulations.
Alexander, I am finding this whole topic so interesting because I've heard of harvesting rainwater like just vaguely, like in passing, never pay much attention to it. But to
Hmm.
hear you talk about it and the benefits of it, I am just finding this whole and I'm finding this so interesting. I just wanted to
Yes.
stop the podcast and say I'm finding this thing so interesting to learn
Good.
about harvesting and recycling rainwater. Like, oh my goodness.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it is, I always, whenever I talk to people or talk to audience, I tell them about our indigenous cultures. They had it
Hmm.
right. They collected rainwater. I mean, that was the only
Yeah.
thing that they had, right? Before, this infrastructure that we have now. But they had it right. And to bring that back to the fold, something as simple as, like you said, harvesting rainwater is phenomenal, that needs to be done. So,
Yes. So obviously I don't know, or maybe not obviously, but I don't know much of anything about recycling rainwater. But what I do know, and you can expound on this, don't you have to keep, like if someone at home is wanting to start harvesting or recycling their rainwater, don't you have to keep it moving? You can't just put it in those, like the containers, if you will, and just let it sit there stagnant, right?
right. So here's how that works. So I mentioned the rain barrels before, right? So with
Mhm.
the rain barrel, the way that they operate, if you can think of a drum, right? And at the top of the drum, you have a little bit of opening, probably about the size of your hand, with a mesh over the top. Now, over in your gutter, your gutter is coming down, and instead of it falling onto the ground, right, and running off into the ground, you have it going into there. So that mesh will actually capture some of the debris that comes off of your roof, right?
Okay.
And in doing that, the mesh has to be should be, I should say, very, very, very small, where water can pass, and water can really pass through much anything. Reason being, in this climate, in the area where we are, if you let that water sit there and it doesn't move, mosquitoes will begin to gravitate toward it. As much of the meshes that we can put on top to protect ourselves, um, somehow they find a way in there. And then now you have a barrel full of mosquitoes. So
Yeah.
utilizing that rainwater when it comes out, and making sure that it's being moved to water the lawn or water your garden or even wash your car, right? Just making sure that it's always moving. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Just make sure it's moving.
How can harvesting rainwater help with promoting a healthy ecosystem?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. So, water conservation, I should say. So, the collection and the preservation, I should say, of water, right, is key. The other is the resilience to climate change. So we know that climate patterns are changing and whatnot. So, um, utilizing it for that, the resiliency to for climate change, and then I would say. Environmental stewardship and also the community engagement. Um, running projects in your community with your neighborhood associations and things like that would allow the community to come together again in an environmental stewardship capacity that will, allow these things to happen.
Oh, okay. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. You have been in this space of harvesting rainwater for several years at this point, Alexander. What would you say is your intention in this space or your goal in this space?
My goal in this space is to number one, bring awareness.
Okay.
So Aura's mission is to make sure everyone has access to clean water and to know its true power. That
Mhm.
clean water component is the water that's in the aquifers now or is contaminated. For the people that are listening, PFASs, PFAOs are contaminating not only the earth, but also humans. And that being said, there's a movie called Dark Waters, which I encourage everybody, your audience, to watch. And that's due to companies like Dow Chemical, a lot of chemical plants, chemical companies before the environmental movement happened and regulations changed. They used to take the residue from the chemicals and dump them into the rivers. And in dumping them into the rivers, again, that water begins to seep down into the aquifers, and they're calling them forever chemicals now. So the forever chemicals sit there and they bind with the water, and it is almost impossible to take apart those chemicals because now you're on the cellular level with the chemicals and they're binding to take them apart. So there's a huge push now for people to um, be aware of PFASs and PFAOs and how the government now is struggling to say how can we get rid of this? How could we do this? Because it's all types of formalities. And forgive me for going off on that tangent. I just get so passionate about it in reference to
Yes.
uh, the change. I hopefully I answered that question. If not, ask it again, and I'll make sure I stay on task. Because, again, the human body and the consumption of water is my passion. And when it comes to environmental stewardship, I dive in. I just completely dive in and lose myself.
No, you answered the question perfectly. Thank you for that, Alexander. So, follow-up question, what are or can you explain to us you use the acronym PFASs and PF, is it OSs?
A- AOs, yeah.
Okay, AOs.
PFASs and PFAOs, yeah.
What does that acronym stand for?
Well, that acronym stands for polymers. Long story, polymers, right? So you have two types of polymers, and I mentioned the chemical companies before. So the way that they did it is to give you an example. Remember the nonstick pans that we had,
Yes. Yes.
right? Where water just runs off of them, and nothing sticks to it. That's PFAS. That's chemicals in the PFAS and PFAO. So when they get a hold of something and they bind, right? Um, and what we come to find out is that over time, that these chemicals is not good for human consumption, and when they get inside of the human body, they form formalities, meaning the human body can't get rid of it, and
Mm-hmm.
it begins to um, morph or what's the word? I'm thinking about X-Men, but mutants. We begin to become mutants in this thing. So for those PFASs and PFAOs, known that group of chemicals which are man-made, known together as the forever chemicals because they're forever around and they're tough to bind and break off. That's the area in which they go under the forever
Okay.
chemicals. So if you go on Google and look up forever chemicals, you'll find a whole list of chemicals in these two realms, but they all fall under the PFASs and PFAOs.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So let's talk about something that I feel like everybody can agree on. We all want to save money. Whatever,
Mm-hmm.
wherever we are in our life, we want to save money. So how can
Yep.
harvesting money, I mean, how can harvesting rainwater help save money on our household water bills?
First of all, it's save on the water, depending on how
Yeah.
big of a tank you have, right? Because you
Okay.
got you get in charge for the water that you use, right, from the municipality. And we talked earlier about the demand, the strenuous demand on municipalities. But if you have your own water source, your water bill would decrease properly. People that have wells, for example, they don't have a high water bill as people who don't. So that's one thing on the demands of that. Irrigation, irrigating. Again, you don't have that demand on a water system and having that come over. So the irrigation, meaning watering your lawn, watering your garden, making sure that your uh, yard is accurately irrigated, making that the water moves, in an appropriate way where it actually can go down and um, save. Laundry, we talked about laundry too, right? Because as you have these huge tanks, they come into the home. You can use it for, again, toilet flushing, laundry, brushing your teeth. So you have your own kind of like water source versus putting that strenuous demand on the water system that the municipalities have. So that's how I way to you can actually save some money.
I know in some areas they put fluoride in the water, and not the
Hmm.
rainwater, but like the tap water and things like that. They put fluoride in that water, and that's supposed to be healthy for the strengthening of your teeth. So if somebody starts doing like the recycled or harvested rainwater, will the lack of fluoride have a negative effect on their teeth?
Okay, so this is a good subject, and I'm going to be careful because I respect you and I respect your audience. Um, the I'm gonna just say this: the milk industry uh, put on a campaign, a marketing campaign, a while ago, and that campaign was they try to convince us to use to drink milk, right? But most people said, "Hey, no, this isn't good for us. This is not right." So they came out with a campaign, just drink milk, right, to
Mhm.
help with their sales. When it comes to fluoride, fluoride is not accepted in a lot of countries around the world, and that's for a reason. Here in the United States, we accept it. In fact, we actually take and buy other countries' fluoride uh, from their systems. And fluoride, and again, your audience do their own research, but fluoride has been proven not to be that thing that is good for our teeth or human consumption. The fluoride is actually used to make sure that the distribution lines stay intact. I mentioned that
Okay.
earlier, where chemicals are added to make sure that the distribution lines are not corroded or corrosive. Um, so with 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 fluoride, again, do your own research. You come up with your own conclusion. I would just say just have the knowledge. Moving forward with fluoride.
Okay. And again, just piggybacking on what Alexander said, neither one of us are doctors, neither one of us are dentists or anything like that. So, the information that we're talking about on here, please go and continue to educate yourself. Please, Google or read whatever you need to do to educate yourself more fully on the topic of rainwater and including fluoride as well. If you so choose to, like if that's what you want to do, you want more information on that, please go and do your own research on that. Um, Maybe you could probably only speak to the Austin, Texas area, Alexander. But does harvesting rainwater offer any financial incentives or rebates in like people's states or cities?
Absolutely, and thank you for that. Especially here in Austin, and more states that are coming online um, because of the sustainability and moving forward, climate change, and people who like myself that understand and believe in the earth and environmental stewardship are becoming more in more in power to
Okay.
change regulation and make regulations happen. Um, But here in Austin, yes, there are incentives. Again, check with your local county because they're out there. But yes, they give rebates back, in the form of money, vouchers, um, discounts from your municipality or from your local government. But yes, they are uh, beginning to do that and move in that direction. Yes, there are
Okay.
incentives.
Now, this is a two-part question. If you don't know, just let me know. But do you know the average consumption of water that a household uses? And the reason I'm asking that is because my follow-up question to that is how much would harvesting rainwater and using rainwater decrease that number?
Good question. I can answer some of that, right? It depends on the amount of people in the household and how much water is being used. There's a lot of variables there to factor. Let's just put it to you like this: from a drinking standpoint, the average family of four, meaning husband, wife, two kids, middle age, they would consume roughly 4 5 gallon bottles of water in a
Okay.
month. So if you can equate that to, just put it into perspective, that's the average amount of water that one used just to drink. Now you can multiply that by three because now you got your showers, you got your cars, you got your brushing your teeth, you got your cooking, you got your other things. So it's quite a bit, big number of water that is being used per household, I would say.
Okay. And what would that reduction be with harvesting the rainwater?
So it depends on your capturing space. The example I gave earlier was west part of Texas, which is the hill country here, and people have tanks. They have sizes from 10,000 gallon tanks to 20,000 gallon tanks to 65,000 gallon tanks to 100,000 gallon tanks. So it depends on the size of the tank in which you're holding or your
Hmm.
reservoir, for example.
Okay.
So it would depend on that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Um, does harvesting rainwater increase someone's property value or does it decrease someone's property value? And the reason I'm asking is because, if I was a home buyer seeing like the tanks at the house, I don't know how that would I like that? Would I not like that? I don't know. But
Mhm.
harvesting rainwater, does that increase your value of your home and your property?
I would think it would increase the value. I talked earlier about the incentives, right, that you're given,
Right.
and the movement and sustainability. So people who are again conscious and environmental stewards are looking for homes that has this infrastructure already embedded. That way they don't have to spend the money to, get
Right.
these things done or the regulations to get this done. If it's there and it's moving in that direction, the incentives, the aesthetics of it, because you can have it retrofitted and outfitted, meaning the tanks, to look good, and they can blend it into the natural landscape of the homes. So I would say yes, it is a increase in value to the homes to have rainwater harvesting, especially the infrastructure already intact as a buyer.
You have been speaking about the legalese, if you will, about harvesting rainwater. And of course there is, and we're all thankful that it is because it keeps us healthy and it keeps us safe. But
Hmm.
what are some of the legal regulations or restrictions around harvesting rainwater?
So again, depending on the states, right? So the states, the last I read, doesn't like the for people to use rainwater. Number one, I believe that the demand of municipal water coming in keeps them in business, keeps them
Okay.
going, right? That's the
Yeah.
first thing. The second thing is when people um, use rainwater, the health reasons, right? Meaning airborne diseases they're trying to control, um, like cholera and things like that. So to regulate that will help mitigate. the health and wellness of individuals trying to do that. It's just like if you could think of someone living in a rural area, right, and they have a well. Well, may have the county person come out, every so often to make sure that the well is, up to code or up to standard, because again, health reasons. Why?
Right. Can you or do you know any communities, schools, neighborhoods that have successfully implemented harvesting rainwater? Obviously, besides your company, Aurora Rainwater, but any other municipalities or cities or towns, even schools. I know you said sometimes you speak to schools about harvesting rainwater with their community gardens that you can tell us that has been successful with doing this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can go online on Google and look, just examples. And there's countless examples around the country, actually, that people are starting to use it. Even in New York City, in New York, there are buildings that are being built and they have rainwater harvesting uh, towers on the rooftop. Uh, there are buildings that are being built today that the emergency um, backup for fire is a rainwater harvesting tank. Well, rainwater tank that holds the rainwater there for fire and equipment. Schools, schools are big now, especially here in the Austin area, on rainwater harvesting because they are starting school gardens and community gardens and things like that. So we are moving in that direction when it comes to sustainability for rainwater and rainwater harvesting. It's a much needed thing. I
Mhm.
hope that everyone research and actually dive in and start to do that, because as we do that, we definitely will see a change not only in the climate but also in the landscape. Uh, we'll see much more greener, less plush um, fields and grasslands and things like that. So I'm all for it.
What would you say? And I know it depends on each individual, but just if you could just give us a guesstimate, which is my word for guess and estimate put together. If you can give us a guesstimate about the initial cost of starting up harvesting rainwater.
Again, it depends on the size of the tank and the size of your collection area, but I would say for a house that is, let's say 15, 20, let's say 2,000 square feet, home space of 2,000 square feet.
Okay.
That home would probably take a 10 to 20,000 gallon tank, and that can cost roughly between $3,500 to start, just with the tank, and then you have your infrastructure that has to be built out. So you're looking at roughly a cost of about maybe 10,000, fifteen
Okay.
thousand to start with. But again, that adds value to the home as time
Right.
goes on, and then you have those incentives as well. Um, and overall, you have the nutritional factor for rainwater, which is priceless in my opinion, because you're putting something that is pure into the body, and which again is made for us. So health and wellness coming to that part is it's infinite. There's no price tag on that.
We have spent the majority of the podcast talking about the benefits of harvesting rainwater, the benefits to the body, the benefits to the even the ecosystem. Are there any challenges to harvesting rainwater? Are there any challenges to I would say like just stopping drinking like the tap water or the bottled water that we buy and then starting to drink the rainwater. Are there any challenges in any of those areas?
Um, so far as rainwater is concerned, I think the challenge is that a lot of people don't know about it. A lot of people are still skeptical about rainwater. I mean, if it begins to rain and you're outside, you're gonna run. You know,
Hmm.
I mean, it's the stuff that is falling down, right? Or you're gonna get an umbrella and kind of pull it up. So
Yes.
the fear is that people uh, think acid rain is still, that thing that we had back in the '80s when it's
Hmm.
actually not. Um, but other than that, I don't see any hurdles, right? And again, I think everyone should be doing this, looking into rainwater and rainwater harvesting, and utilizing rainwater as much as possible, um, for their consumption of water.
Okay. You have been in this space and working, you have your own company, Aurora Rainwater Alexander. What policies or regulations do you think need to be implemented to encourage more people to start harvesting rainwater and using harvested rainwater?
Well, I think regulation wise, as more and more states begin to um, understand the benefits of rainwater, that it will become something that we could use very often. It's abundant. It's really
Okay.
abundant, even in places where there's drought. When it rains, that that water could be utilized for various reasons overall. So I think that people should, uh, especially municipalities and governments, should just have an open mind and just start to bend and change regulations to allow this to happen. Overall, I think it would be a better Earth overall when people start harvesting rainwater.
What do you see as the future of rainwater, of harvesting rainwater, excuse me?
I see I see every home using this. In fact, I'm going to throw in something here, and forgive me if I do, but just imagine you buying a new home. Now we
Okay.
mentioned about the rainwater. We mentioned the rainwater tanks in your home, and
Hmm.
you said, "Ooh, I don't know, that might be aesthetically ugly." Which, to the degree I agree. But just imagine moving into a new development that when you turn on the tap, you have rainwater coming out of the tap, right? Already done. So that's water that it can be consumed to you overall, right, for good health. We're reducing the municipal water demands, all of the things that I mentioned throughout the podcast. Just imagine that, just having a community that provides rainwater to every home in that particular development.
Oh, yes. Oh, I love that. Now,
Yeah,
that is something I can imagine, Alexander.
yeah, yeah. It's coming soon. It's here.
Really
Yes,
be a green community. Like, I think that would
it will
really
be a green
push
community.
being a green community to the forefront.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then we're working on.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I agree.
Now, if you've watched TV in the last, or the news or social media in the last 10 to 15 years, one of the things that they're always talking about is increased consumption, increased
Hmm.
use of water, increased use of electricity, increased use of oil and gas, increased use of consumption. What role do you think harvesting rainwater can play in meeting those needs of increased consumption?
So meeting the needs again, reducing the water demand, right, on the municipalities and companies that drill into the earth. You mentioned
Hmm.
oil and gas, so we know for a fact that oil and gas is detrimental to the earth. Extracting that oil and gas, and it takes millions of years to produce that liquid or that thick, oil that we pull up, right? And we're going to run there's a lot of it. I don't think we're ever going to run out, but it's definitely being reduced and is actually shifting the things that are happening underneath our feet as we
Hmm.
speak, from the water streams to the landscape and the whole nine. Um, the same water. Think about this: the same water that the dinosaurs drank. It's the same water that's being used today because of the water
Really?
cycle. Think about it. When it rains, the water comes down. It
Yes.
goes into the earth, right?
Yes.
Some of it's evaporated back up, and the process happens all over again. So it's a
Yeah.
continuous cycle. It's a continuous cycle. So we're not making more water on the earth, right? We're just
Right.
continuously using the water over, and that's one sustainable substance out of the list of things you named that will remain absolutely the same.
Wow. I never thought about that. That is a true aha moment for me.
Hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay. What research advancements are being made to further improve harvesting rainwater?
So I would like to think that we, meaning Aura Rainwater, is a leader in the industry. The process, right, of rainwater. There are companies out there that actually build the tanks, and they do a great job at putting the tanks up and around. There are more companies coming online that would actually have the water come into the home, right, and trying to filter those that rainwater out, and regulations and things like that happening. Um, so overall, I think the more we educate ourselves and the more we know, the better it will be, overall.
Do you think, and I know this is a grand question, but do you think it's possible that harvested rainwater could replace water as we know it, how we use it permanently? Taking our bath with it, cooking with it, gardening with it, like everything that we do with water today, that harvested rainwater could one day replace that?
I don't think it'll happen in our lifetime, and reason
Okay.
being, it's all about education. There are people that have been doing things for a while, a certain way, and to educate and to shift, even if we shift policy, right, to say, hey, everybody stop using, municipalities that start using rainwater. So now we have to build the infrastructures, for the rainwater. And right now, the United States infrastructure is actually crumbling when it comes to water and the water systems because it's so embedded. So, you know, over time, uh, yes, hopefully way that deep in the future that we are taking care of the planet and utilizing rainwater and keeping everything nice and clean. But for now, it's just it's a work in progress, I can say.
Yes. Well, this has been such an interesting podcast for me because, again, I don't know and I've never really heard about harvesting rainwater and just really diving into it like you have allowed me to do with this podcast. So, thank you so much for that. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And thank you for having me on. I really had a good time.
Good. I'm so glad. Now, the last question I have for you, who do you think would make a great guest on the podcast, but you have to help me get them on?
I think a great person to help and elevate and educate would be Dr. Jamie Guyton.
Okay.
Um, she's a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information, another forward thinking mind, and will help, I think, your audience question, right, and dive deeper into some research, but just opening up their minds to something bigger and better.
Oh, and that's what we love here on this Crystal Petrie podcast. That's exactly what we love.
Awesome. Yes.
Again, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Alexander. I really, really appreciate it.
That my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. And I had a wonderful time. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. And to my listeners, my viewers, my audience, thank you as well for tuning in and watching and listening. You can get Alexander's podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.